Star Wars Geek Girls. They're geek girls that like Star Wars. And sometimes cry.
Hello and welcome to Star Wars Geek Girl. I'm Zoe. Lizzy was busy tonight, so won't be joining us, but I'm here with a very special guest who will introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Von Ohlen. I'm the brand manager at Denuo Novo, a licensee for high-end Star Wars costumes and collectibles. And I'm so excited to be here with you tonight, Zoe. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited. A lot of big Star Wars news pretty recently. But I always like when we have a new person on the show, I always want to talk about like your general Star Wars experience, like what it means to you and how Star Wars is integrated into your life, I guess.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong Star Wars geek. I know you're in college. I am we'll just go on average 20 years older than you. But I am not an OT fan in that I wasn't alive in 1977. I always joke that my parents had not even started dating yet. So I am what I refer to as a child of Endor. I grew up on the Ewoks. They're really what pulled me into Star Wars. I'm pretty sure I saw Return of the Jedi as my first Star Wars movie, probably when I was like 3 years old, 4 years old, when it was like playing on like free TV. And then I loved all the made for TV Ewoks movies and the cartoons, Ewoks and Droids. And of course, the merch, I had all the action figures. And in fact, it's funny with Christmas coming up right now, like my wish list still has like Star Wars toys on it, like I'm a little kid. I was originally like a fan, and then I started working in Star Wars about 8 years ago when I started at Topps, the trading card company. And I've been in the space now, having done trading cards, the autographing business there, and now at Ruby's Costumes, which is where we met at Star Wars Celebration
Yeah.
at the Denuo Novo booth. So there's no escaping the Star Wars. It'll stay with you.
Yeah, similar. I was more of a Clone Wars kid, for sure. But similar, just you just grow up with it and can't can't really get away, I guess. That sounds like a terrible way to put it. But
Well,
it
I joke that they get you in the tractor beam, and there's no
yeah,
escape. So
yeah. They really get a hold on you. And it's quite remarkable. Yeah. So I know you have a show about rebels, and I remember you being very excited about Sabine when I was
yes.
in costume. So, how is Rebels like? How does that factor into your love for Star Wars?
Oh yeah, so Rebels is an interesting one for me because I've always loved animation. I'm actually a big animation geek outside of Star Wars. When I was a kid, in the height of like the '80s commercialization of like creating franchises around properties with the full action figure cartoon after school, every piece of merch you can imagine. That was He-Man, Thundercats, GI Joe, Transformers, generation, and it sort of stays with you. So I've always loved all forms of cartoons, animation, and then when Rebels hit, it was when I started working on at Topps. I joined in 2014, right after they had been taken over by Disney, where after Lucasfilm had been taken over by Disney, started working on new trilogy content. But the thing that was running, the thing that was on air right when I started was Rebels. And so I was watching on my own before I had started the job, but then I started working on product. And so for me, it's like the starting point of my career in Star Wars, and stayed with me. I was there from like all the way until the finale. And it's been my favorite slice of all of Star Wars. Like people really ask me, what's your favorite part of Star Wars? And I always truthfully say Rebels. And sometimes it takes them a second. They're like, do you mean the Rebel Alliance? I was like, no, I mean the cartoon Rebels. 4 seasons, Disney XD, 80 something episodes, perfection.
Yeah, I absolutely obviously Rebels is something very important to me too. I really love so much about it. Obviously, I'm very attached to Sabine as a character. Ahsoka has also always been my favorite character since I was a kid, and she's in there a little bit. So I would also probably agree Rebels is my favorite Star Wars, but I'm always curious because I feel like this answer is different from almost everyone you talk to. So like what is it about Rebels that draws you to it so much?
One of the things I really love, and it doesn't get credit for it because it is a cartoon. People think of animation as a genre, not a medium, and so it doesn't get taken seriously the way it should. I think that Rebels does a better job than most other parts of the saga of talking about the Force. and what does it really mean to be a Jedi? We see it through the eyes of Kanan, who was only a Padawan and didn't really become a Jedi Knight, and had to figure out, like, he was a Jedi in hiding. He survived Order 66. He had to live secretly, and then now he's training someone who's new in the Force with very little training himself. So we get this imperfect teacher with this like very rambunctious kid, kind of like Ahsoka. There's definitely parallels there. A little bit like Cal Kestis, these young kids who need some guidance, but they don't have the same wisdom and architecture that like Yoda was giving to everyone else in like the prequel era. But I think the things they explore in Rebels are really deep and heavy and interesting. And people, and we can see it spreading into every other part of the saga right now. You watch the Obi-Wan Kenobi live action show and there's like shades of Rebels there. You watch Andor and you could like feel it in the blood, the way the rebellion builds. Mon Mothma has a huge arc in Rebels. And then we see her come to life on screen again, like in Andor in a huge way. So Rebels is like kind of this accidental glue. Like it ties really closely to Rogue One. And these guys like, they form a family and help build the rebellion and achieve huge things like liberating Lothal and helping free Mandalore. They do a ton while also being really fun and accessible as well, bringing in like kids. So which I think is a really important part of this as well. Like you can't forget that kids really are the primary focus for Star Wars, or should be.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I like what you say about Rebels being the accidental glue, because that's something I'm finding like more and more as we go forward in Star Wars. It feels like Rebels is kind of the blueprint in a lot of ways for a lot of stuff we're doing, and there's like this huge focus on like live action I think people have, and like who's moving into live action and like what they're doing with this live action show, this when like animation in Star Wars with Rebels, and then also Clone Wars has really been so much of the backbone. Like so much of what we're seeing in these live action shows is very much derived from Rebels or Clone Wars, like 90% of the time.
Oh yeah. I
So
mean, Ahsoka started as an animated character and now she's
mhm.
getting her own show. Her logo is the World Between Worlds, which was introduced in Rebels. I think animation is a really important part of Star Wars, and I would tell people like don't skip it. I know there are 7 seasons of Clone Wars. It's a lot. Not every episode is great. Most of them are at least good though, and they're fun and they're relatively quick and easy. Rebels is pretty fast. It's 4 seasons, but I think all of the storytelling really holds up, and it gives you some really great insight into some characters like Maul. We also get his final moments in that show. There's some big story arcs that happen within Rebels.
Mhm.
And I think they're all handled really well. It's actually like the main focus of my show. So one of the reasons we brought up Rebels. My show on Monday nights on the Virtual Cantina Network is called Star Wars Rebels Revisited, and we really revisit it. Like we rewatch episodes and we talk about the relevancy of that episode now in the current streams and how things are affected. So of course, with Obi-Wan Kenobi airing, and then the countdown to Andor and everything, it was a real treat to see like, oh, there's been Mon Mothma, and here were the Inquisitors. We first met the Grand Inquisitor and the Fifth Brother in season 2 of Star Wars Rebels. And of course, Ahsoka will continue her story into yet the next chapter. She went from Age of Republic to Age of Rebellion, and now she's going into Age of New Republic. That character, by the way, she's gonna outlive all of us. That character's never gonna die.
Yeah,
Like she's just gonna keep
absolutely.
going, and I'm fine with that.
No, I think Ahsoka will never die. I think, she has the force of the sister or the daughter from Mortis
Mm,
in her. She's just immortal now, and it's
yeah.
awesome. Good for
I'm
her.
fine with that.
Yeah.
The owl being in the final shot of Clone Wars, true. Like
Hmm.
that. Which, if you're sort of a casual fan and maybe you just tuned in for the end and you're like, "Oh, it's Vader," I screamed at the Convor. I was like, "That's the
Hmm.
like the owl."
Yeah.
Never mind Vader. I was like, "I've seen Vader 1,000 times." But the owl was there, so I was like, "Oh, it's here." Pour one out for Ahsoka and
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, you think Rebels, like Inquisitors come from Rebels in the
Yeah,
modern canon. Like there's been so much. They've been in so many video games. I know there's a book coming out about one, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, so much. And they come from Rebels, like so
yeah.
much
That was the
comes
starting
from
point.
Rebels. I mean, Thrawn in canon comes from Rebels. Like it's such a marvel, and I'm glad there's a show revisiting it. Reminds me a bit of Rebels Recon. I remember Rebels
Yes.
Recon came out every week when Rebels was airing. And then they did one for Resistance too, which is another, I think, very underappreciated animated gem of Star Wars. But they haven't done them for any of the live action, which makes me really
Yeah, I'm
sad because I
surprised.
always I always like that little weekly, like, get some trivia, sit down with Pablo Hidalgo for a
Yeah.
bit. Like,
Well, Andy's
very
just so
fun.
engaging, and she and
Yes.
Anthony, it was lightning in a bottle with the two of them. I don't
Hmm.
know why they didn't continue the weekly Star Wars show that they were doing because Andy and Anthony had on-screen presence like few people do. Like some people just have it, right? They've got natural
Hmm.
charisma. They're easy to talk to. The talent really likes them. Lucasfilm corporate really likes them. Everyday viewers really like them. Like that's a hard trifecta to hit. And they were hosting all sorts of stuff outside of their own show, but they were never on-air talent to begin with. They were working in corporate, and then they became the on-air talent. And the Rebels Recon, I actually watch it every week along with my Rebels episode watch, so I can hear what Andy had to say about the episode and to see what she asked Pablo. And you could see the breadcrumbs going, and like what they can and can't say. It was really
Yeah.
interesting because it's like a little time capsule of the moment.
Hmm.
I was so happy they were back at Celebration too to host the main stage. I was like, they need to host everything. Like there needs to be Star Wars weekends again.
Yeah.
I was like, send them on the road. Like they should be the faces of the brand, truly.
Hmm. Yeah. But I remember that there's so much, like you said, like the time capsule. That's why I like looking at trailers after. I rewatched some of the Rebels trailers like a week ago, and it was just so funny because there's some things I'm like, that didn't even really matter. Like you just
Yeah.
put that shot in there. Like I always think of Ezra's cross guard.
Mm,
That shot that was in the trailer, and it was like right after Force Awakens came out, I think, or right around that time. So I was like, oh my God. And then there's people like, oh my God, is
yeah.
Ezra Kylo Ren? Like everyone's freaking out. And then he's like, he picks it up. It's like, oh, cool. Like
Yeah. It didn't
that's the
really
whole
pay
thing.
off. Of all the things that
Yeah.
happened in Twilight of the Apprentice, no one's talking about that crossguard saber.
Yeah.
That was very shoehorned in, which funny enough, we just got a trailer this week with a crossbar
Yeah.
cross handle lightsaber for Cal Kestis.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. Like, I would like
Yeah.
to wield that in a video game. Poorly, by the way. I'm bad at those games, but I'm gonna play.
Oh, I'm horrible at Jedi Fallen. It took me forever. If I wasn't getting beat by the droids, I was getting hopelessly lost in the
Mm.
maps and couldn't find my way back.
Oh yeah, no, those open
Um,
world games are not my expertise. I joke about being part of the Nintendo and then eventually the Super Nintendo generation. Like I played Mortal Kombat up until GameCube, but outside of that, these open world games I find really challenging. They're cool because like the content just keeps going and you can kind of go at your own pace. And there's some people who really get into that. It's not my style of gameplay, but the
mhm.
cutscenes, just going on YouTube and watching like the movie play out,
Yeah.
was amazing. I was like, this story is so good. I'd love to see like if they release that as just like a Blu-ray of like here's the story. I would have bought that. I don't even need the game.
It's yeah, such a great story. I'm very excited for the sequel, which had, like you said, the crossguard saber and a lot of other things. Um, Most things that are still very under wraps. Um, but I'm very excited for that game. I'm sure I'll get lost and get beat by the biker scouts again.
Oh yeah, pick
Uh,
an inquis. Someone's gonna kick her ass. I mean, the ninth sister. That was the big one. The big like
yes,
scary
yes.
alien. I had no chance. So it's the kind of thing. And then you get to you fight the wizard guy. I'm blanking on his name.
Hmm.
Impossible. You can put it on the easiest setting. And I'm gonna fall off the ledge. Like Marin is supposed to come in and throw magic and help. It's not helping. So I'm content with like learning how to play a little bit, getting
Hmm.
buying the game. Of course, most importantly, I bought the game, played it a little bit, and then watched my walkthroughs. And for me, I was still a licensee for Topps at the time when this was going on. It was important for me to get some autograph signers. So we brought in Cameron Monaghan and Deborah Wilson to sign for us for cards and for photos and things. And that was very cool. So I was like, that was the most important thing for me. I was like, who's in this cast and who we can get to like sign some stuff.
Yeah, that's super cool. Obviously in your line of work, you work with a lot of different people connected to Star Wars. Do you have, I know there's a lot of things you probably can't say, but do you have any like fun stories about anything in particular that's happened with you for Star Wars?
Oh man, I could write a book. And I think a lot of licensees can. I was also in a really interesting space because I worked very closely with talent. When I started at Topps, it was just the trading cards. And my first project was Force Awakens and everything related to that. But I eventually then led our autographing division where it was autograph photos and live event. So I booked the talent for Star Wars Celebration Chicago in 2019. So I brought 59 actors, and I negotiated pretty much all those deals myself, mostly with agents. And then you meet the talent in person once they finally get there. But you do all your negotiations with the agents for the most part, except for a few people we go direct with. But that was amazing. 5 days in Chicago. It took like a year of planning. Brought in some really killer people. First time I got to meet Paul Bettany. It was the first time we were allowed to have solo people at the show. People from Solo: A Star Wars Story.
Yeah.
Who do we have? Oh, we were able to get Ahmed Best to come as Jar Jar, which he had not done anything in the longest time, and he was delightful to talk to, and he was thrilled to be back. But yeah, behind the scenes, I always joke that it was a little bit like high school, but in a good way. You know, they show the lunchroom tables. There was like a Clone Wars table, and like people were finding their groups, and people hadn't seen each other in ages. Because not everyone was like constantly recording. But on you'll love this because you're a Clone Wars fan. I was able to bring back Matt Lanter, Ashley Eckstein, James Arnold Taylor, Kat Tabor, D. Bradley Baker, Matthew Wood, and Tom Kane. All 7 of them were there for a big group photo, and I still have that photo like framed, and it's up in the house somewhere of me and my husband, who I who I like dragged into helping me at the show as like an assistant. I had like half the Topps payroll there, working behind the scenes. But I was very proud about like that photo with the entirety of the Clone Wars cast, and we had most of the Rebels cast too. I think we had it was Freddie, Taylor, Tia, and Vanessa. We didn't have Steve. Jason Isaacs was also there, but we did a ghost photo with 4 of the 5 key members. Filoni was also there, but not signing. Like he wasn't, but I got to meet him backstage, and I got a photo of Filoni. So that was really like a career highlight for me, and also just amazing to just like spend time with people who are like bringing this brand to life for people, and to see like everyone kind of lose their mind about meeting them. You know, people like go up to them at conventions, and they like give them some big story, or they cry, or I mean, seeing grown men cry like is a thing. So that's always interesting, and it just shows that this brand really, it means a lot to people. You know, it's not just like a commodity. This isn't just like transactional. It's very emotional for people there, and I think that's true for Star Wars more than most other franchises.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was Chicago. Well, definitely Chicago. I saw Ashley, and I'd met her a couple times before, but I saw her there too. And it was at the Chicago. I got to tell Ashley I was wearing one of the dresses she designed to my prom,
That's
which was like a
awesome.
very sweet moment. And then like she was like, "Oh my God, like make sure you tag me in the pictures." And then like, months later I tagged her in the pictures, and she like actually like replied, and I was like over the
Yep.
moon.
She remembers everyone.
She does.
Um,
She absolutely does.
and
She remembered me from years before.
Yep. I couldn't believe it. I thought one time I felt very fancy because we had met, like I met her numerous times across various events, and she came to our booth at New York Comic Con in like 2016 or whatever it was. And then I saw her again the following year in 2017, and she remembered my name, and I was like, oh, I feel so fancy. And then I saw her do the autograph signing for the line with like 100 people, and she knew like 40 people's names who she had met already. And I was like, oh, she either has a photographic memory, or she like legit practices. Like like it's probably some combination of the two. But like she really is that person. Like she's as kind and interesting in real life as you would hope, as you would want her to be. As her public persona presents, it is
Yeah.
also 100% accurate, and that's always
Mhm.
nice to see. Because I will say, outside of the Star Wars fandom, that's not always the case. Like I've worked with actors from a variety of different franchises and whatever else, and I will say the Star Wars people are like hands down the best, the best, the best, the best.
Yeah. Yeah, Ashley's memory is so remarkable. I definitely meet way less people than her, and I'm absolutely
Yeah.
horrible at remembering most of their names.
Oh, I'm the same way.
Um,
People say their name and it goes in like blah blah blah, and like straight away, like as they're saying it, it's already forgotten. It's because
yeah.
our brains are also being trained now to take in too much content.
Hmm.
You know, we're doing too much. I'm sure you're on your phone all the time. Like I'm trying to make a concerted effort to not be that guy, and yet there's always something going on. Like I get emails after hours, and our sale is happening right now. So like if something happens weird on the website, I'm gonna get an email about it. There's sort of no escape from the digital, I guess like the web. Like we're caught in it, honestly, which was what everyone was concerned about 30 years ago, and it's true today. We didn't realize it just like crept in slowly.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's a really great, I think, like you were saying, like Star Wars, like, and how real, like, like Ashley, for example, is, and how kind people are. I think that's something, I've always appreciated, like, and how it means something to people, because of course it's very meaningful to meet, you know, people who bring it to life for you, but like even at so many conventions I've met people who are just like friends and maybe I like connect with online and then meeting them. And
Hmm.
because of Star Wars, I recently, you know, I was across the country from my family um for a couple months for school, and I was like, I didn't really know anybody, but most people well, everybody I knew that was already in California was people I met through Star Wars. And then I was
Yeah.
like, you know, I'm gonna meet some people. So I went to a local Mando Mercs event and
Oh,
just like
nice.
met a bunch of people and just had like built-in friends because of Star Wars.
Yeah.
So it's always so wonderful to hear more about how much it connects people and how much it means to people for sure.
That's my story for sure. I mean, being a licensee for 8 years, I'll go to conventions and see people who, whether I have a booth or whether I'm just going someplace, who we've met through the fandom, 501sters, or people who own the websites, who are big on social media, who are influencers, and I've met them that way. And one of the ways I got the show, the Rebels Revisited show, is I met some of the guys who run the Virtual Cantina Network at a few different conventions, and we just started chatting. I got offered to be like an interview like this, just interview me about what I was
Mm-hmm.
doing at Tops on one of their shows, and then they invited me to co-host, and then they gave me my own show. And I always joke that it's like you will be voluntold the thing that you need to do. And that's what happens. And they're buddies of mine now. So I have like this extended network of like, they were like network, almost like business adjacent, slash in the fandom, the hobby. And now they're legitimately friends, including my
Mm-hmm.
co-host Ashley, who is now in Boston. I'm in New York. We're far away, but she was farther before. And I was like, all right, we have to see each other like more frequently. Now they're at least on the same coast. But yeah, it's a built-in fan base. Yeah, I see more people at like a New York Comic Con or a San Diego Comic Con through Star Wars than I will like at any other point in the year. Like it's kind of crazy, and
Mm-hmm.
they all like treat this very seriously. And it means a lot to them. So I like, which is why like if you end up going to Star Wars Celebration in London, we were talking about that earlier. You'll at least know people there. That's
Yeah.
the one nice thing. You won't be traveling alone for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always, I've been to three celebrations now. I went to Orlando, Chicago, and then Anaheim. And they're like, I'm from Pennsylvania, and none of them
Mhm.
were particularly close. Chicago a little bit closer. But like I didn't really know anybody like in that area, but I knew so many people that were there at Celebration. I ran into so many people. I met so many people in person for the first
Yep.
time. It was just so crazy. Like, you know, you turn a corner and there's another person you know, or another person going, oh hey, like I know, like you don't really know me, but like I know you from this online, or like I met
Yep.
you here, and it's like,
Instagram, Twitter.
yeah.
But I guess everyone's on TikTok now.
Hmm.
I am actively divesting from Twitter, but it's hard because that's where my whole network is. So I try to add people on Hive, and Hive is me at the moment. I don't want to be on Twitter, but I have to keep it active at least in the short term. It's a whole thing, as you know. But yeah,
Hmm.
that's where I built my network. And so I would meet people. Same thing. This is back. So I don't know if you remember this Disney Star Wars weekends. Do you remember those at all?
I went to one. I went to first or the last first one.
Okay.
Like the
So that was
first
like
one of the last year.
2014. Yeah.
Yeah.
2014 or 2015 was the last year. I think it
Hmm.
was 2015 because that was the year we had our cards all over the park.
Yeah.
We had our giant, like everything was labeled in like Topps cards.
Yep. I remember that. I remember that. Yep.
That was really fun. I had very little to do with that. Disney came to us and was like, "We want to use your frame for signage," and we basically just said yes. And was like, "Sure, send us the PDF and we'll like sign off on it or whatever we have to do." And that was cool. But I was already going, just being a Disney geek. My husband and I both love Disney. We had been to Star Wars weekends before I had started working at Tops. We went to like 2010 or 2011. I think we went 2 times before this. And then in 2015, we were going and my activation was there. So I was like, this is so cool. Like, I'm here on a personal trip just for fun with my husband. I'm going to walk around and enjoy Star Wars. And there's like this business adjacent thing happening. And so I sort of turned it into like a little bit of like a networking thing as well. Cause I did a lightsaber build. This was before Galaxy's Edge. So it was like a
Mhm.
$40 lightsaber. Weirdly enough, I met
I
Ashley
think
Eckstein.
I think I
You
did
know,
the same thing. I think I did a
yeah.
lightsaber build. Like I met Ashley that weekend for the first time.
Yeah.
That was the first time I met her.
So nice. Yeah, we saw the
Hmm.
parade. We met Vanessa Marshall. We did a whole bunch of stuff and it was great. And we met a ton of other fandom people, like people who own the fan sites. And it was just a blast. I love the Star Wars fandom. I think even if there's a point in my career where I'm no longer working on Star Wars and I don't know if and when something like that'll happen, like I would still keep up with everyone from that group because they're just all good people, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the Star Wars fandom is definitely, definitely a home. I think it gets a bad rap sometimes because of people online, but
Mhm.
when you go to that in-person event, you can't even doubt that it's
Yeah.
such a great force for
Having
good.
been to, what was it, five celebrations now? Anaheim was 15, Orlando was 17, Chicago was 19, and then Anaheim again was 22, so four. So I've been to four. Um, that online discourse of negativity doesn't exist in that real life space.
Hmm.
Like it's only on YouTube to monetize hatred, which works
Yeah.
in every fandom and in every slice of politics and just life in general. Like hatred's easy to monetize, and you can really tap into some nonsense with Star Wars. It's very easy to click a YouTube video about like Kathleen Kennedy needs to be fired, right? Like that's probably the headline for most of them, and then there's like something wrapped in like misogyny, racism, homophobia, a misunderstanding of the text, and a lack of understanding as to who the villains and heroes are even in the story. It's like sort of a reading comprehension experience. It's a little bit of everything. But like that makes a lot of money. But those people
Hmm.
don't show up to Star Wars Celebration because they don't care. They don't actually care about the
Yeah.
brand. They do care about clicks and money. Um,
Hmm.
it's just Star Wars is, I think, ripe for that.
Yeah.
There's something about this fandom that or not the fandom but like a slice of people who maybe they used to be fans that
Hmm.
they love the hate clicks, just it works.
Hmm. Yeah. I think it was Chicago was after Last Jedi came out.
Hmm.
And that was a whole thing. I don't need to
Yeah,
explain that. But you get that online and it, wears you out a little bit. But then you go to Celebration and there's like Rey and Finn and Rose and Poe everywhere. Like
yeah.
everyone dressed as them. And there's so much love for those characters in that
Mhm.
story. Everyone had a porg on them. And it
And
was like,
all the stormtroopers were first order, they weren't
yeah,
classic.
such
Like
a
everything shifted, so
mhm, like such a breath of fresh air. Like even like Anaheim last year, like when Kenobi came out, I was one of the lucky people that got to see it like
mhm.
that night and the big screen. And like everyone was just buzzing about it all weekend. Everybody, the next day was like, oh my God, like, do you see Kenobi? Oh my gosh, like I love Blade, like all this stuff. And then, you get back to the real world and there's people whining on the internet. And you're like, oh, come
Yeah.
on, man.
I'm I'm in the mindset that I like the content I like. I'll
Hmm.
talk about the stuff I like, and if there's something I don't like, I usually just don't talk about it. If
Yeah.
I think something is harmful, I think you should confront it, right? That's different. But if there's something you just don't like love, or you don't think is up to the standard, like there's no point of discussing. Like we can have actual discourse about what we think works and doesn't. Like I actually think the volume works really well for Mando, and it didn't work as well for Obi-Wan. And that's like a legitimate discussion about like special effects and staging, right? Like there are things in
Hmm.
here where it's like, okay, this worked great for Mando, and it just didn't work for Obi-Wan. And I think it was actually like quantity of characters on screen. Mando's usually on his own, and it gives you these broad sweeping visuals. But when you have too many people on screen, like it just doesn't look the same. Like it looks like they're on a soundstage. And I was like, okay, that's a legitimate conversation about special effects. But other
Hmm.
people are like, Obi-Wan was rushed and it was cheap and it was this and I have problems with that. I don't like Riva. And I was like, well, why don't you like Riva? And then they'll give you all the reasons. And it really does, like, it's kind of saying nothing, but you hear the misogyny and you hear the racism. And it's like, okay, well, it's like, well, do you have a legitimate reason why you don't like this character? Like, other than using the phrase Mary Sue, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
that drives me crazy. And I try to stay away from all that discourse too. If you turn
Hmm.
into Rebels Revisited, the most I'll get is like a character ranking, and I'll leave off the people I don't like. Like that's as negative as we get over there. It's like I like this a lot, and then there are other things that I'm like not that into. Like I'm kind of not following a lot of the books, and that's just because I'm not a great like reader on my own. I'm just I'd rather watch the TV.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the same. I think I've done a pretty good job at curating social media where I don't really see it. The most I'll see is like other people kind of like calling it out, which is good.
Mhm.
But I'm like, it's just, I'm just like, oh, I don't like that block. Like,
Yeah.
it's so
It could be
easy.
exhausting. It could be
Mhm.
exhausting. And right, I actually tell people like the block button is free, the mute button is free. No one is owed your time. Um, and even me, like my Twitter seems so integrated with work. I'm Darth Von Ohlen on Twitter and Instagram, and it is very Star Wars focused, so it does feel a little bit worky. Whereas like my Facebook's just very personal. So if people ask me stuff on Twitter, like I will usually reply with the understanding that people are asking me usually as the brand manager of my brand, as opposed to just me. So in that case, like I'm not like a major blocker, you know. But I also think that you have to take care of yourself first, you know. You're no one should be abusive and hateful on social media, and if they are, it's just like I don't need to see that. Go away. Yeah.
Mhm. Um, Circling back like a little bit to like Rebels in animation, we also have the Bad Batch season 2 trailer came out, and it looks like we're getting a lot of more Clone Wars follow-up
Yes.
stuff, but a few possible smaller Rebels connections. I know we got Hera last
Hmm.
season, which was huge, as well as little baby Kanan.
Yeah.
Um,
Caleb Doom in the opening, in the first
yeah,
episode,
right away.
voiced by Freddie. A lot of those, I was like, you say that sentence out loud and it sounds crazy. So that was a surprise. Hera being in there was a surprise. Obviously, she's with Chopper. So three of the Ghost crew have now made their debut in Bad Batch. I was actually talking about this last night. I think that we'll see Sabine and her family because
Mhm.
Sabine is going to be such a major player in the Ahsoka show that they like planting characters who are like, we'll say secondary characters in multiple places so you can find them. Like Mon Mothma, she's everywhere, right? She's in Return of the Jedi, she's in the Clone Wars, she's in Rebel, she's in Andor, she's in Rogue One. Like she's not a Vader, but now that she's across all these different places, you can find her and understand who she is. I think they'll do the same with Sabine. Like I think we'll see her, or at least the rest of the Wrens, maybe Ursa, maybe Tristan, maybe the dad, if he's still there pre-capture, on some, where they are on Mandalore, maybe before she joins the Empire. Like there's any
Mhm.
number of ways they could go down that road. I think that would be really interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, depending on how much time they jump, because she could still be like a very, very little kid, which would also just be adorable.
Yeah, that would be really fun.
Depending on how much time they jump. I personally, I'm a really big Zeb fan. I think he gets overlooked a lot, sadly.
He does.
And
Yeah.
I don't think he'll be in Ahsoka, but I'm kind of okay with it because I feel like live action Zeb might be a little scary, personally. But maybe they'll do it. But I think getting to explore Lasan a little bit, would be cool. So that's
I
my
think that'd be
like
fun.
that's my little tiny hope for the Bad Batch is they go that way. But
We already have a young Wookiee.
we're
There's
getting
nothing
Gunji.
stopping us from more interesting hairy aliens.
Hmm.
And that's the guy from Clone Wars. I'm
Yes,
blanking on his name.
Gunji, the
Gunji,
Gunji,
yes.
the little.
Other people seem to be obsessed with him. I think
I
he's cool.
love
You
I
know,
love him.
yeah, I think he's cool. Other people though lost their minds, and I was like, I love when that
I
happens because my husband's like that with Bib Fortuna, and it's the kind of thing when Bib popped into Bad Batch, we were screaming. You would have thought we won the Super Bowl. I was like, it's Bib. And other people are like, who cares? And then other people, I was watching this, I was like, oh, that's that Wookiee kid, I think, from Clone Wars, and then other people like lost their mind on Twitter for,
I
yeah.
I was very lucky to be in the panel for the Bad Batch celebration, and I
Mm.
very loudly like full shriek, like you would have thought someone stabbed me,
That's
like scream,
awesome.
and like half the auditorium screamed too. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't alone, and it was great. Yeah, a lot to look forward to in the Bad Batch. I'm very excited for like Mando season 3 and Ahsoka, obviously, but animation still has my heart in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Hoping to see them. I have a feeling we're gonna see Ahsoka. And if it's
I think
animated, it'll
possibly, yeah.
probably be Ashley. So I think it'd be
Yep.
very cool to get some Ashley Ahsoka and Rosario Ahsoka in the same time frame and
Oh yeah, that
see,
would
see
be in
them
the same
sharing,
year. Yeah.
seeing them sharing that character.
Yeah.
Would be
We're
very
seeing it in
lovely.
real life now. I'm sure
Wait,
I'm
I
sure you've
saw
seen
that picture of them.
yeah.
Yes,
That's a
so
good
cute.
thing. Because I know there was some discourse about how there was conflict there, which I think is nonsense, but
Hmm.
very smart to have that photo up of the two of them being like, "Hey guys, check us both out at this convention and we're both signing stuff." Like, please, like that's a good signal. I'm all for it. Like whether it's staged or not, like this is a good thing. And by the way, I don't think it is. Ashley doesn't play that. Like I think that Ashley and Rosario are both reasonable people, and understanding of like what's happening with this character. And by the way, it'll live on past Rosario. There'll be another woman who does this voice 20 years from now or something, or however, because the franchise is just going to keep going. Yeah, how many people have done Leia now? It's got to be 7 or 8 actresses that have done her voice, whether it's video games or um, various animated projects like Forces of Destiny. She's been in Resistance. Like it was Carrie, obviously, who carried that character for years and years and years and years. But in alternative content, like we had Julie Dolan, we had oh my god, I'm blanking on literally that was Shelby Young, Kat Tabor at one point, Anna Graves. Like there's a bunch of them who have done Leia. Same thing with Han Solo. Every character is going to have multiple holders. There are like 9 Boba Fett's. So I think people just have to get used to that.
You think how many Vader/Anakins we have? Like
So many Vader Anakins. And who really gets credit, right? Like how many people really did it in Rogue One? There's maybe 4. We know 2 are in the credits. And other people are maybe not credited. It's like a whole thing. So
even Din Djarin has like 4, I think.
Yeah, there are 4 Mandos. We got Pedro, we got Latif, we've got Brendan Wayne, and there's yet another stunt guy whose name I'm blanking on. So, and by the way, they're all so different height-wise, it blows my mind. I was like, Brendan Wayne is like a foot taller than Pedro Pascal. It is crazy.
Really?
They're
That's
so different in
funny.
height. You gotta find here's the thing. I don't know if Lucasfilm lets them stand near each other, but you gotta look them up their measurements. Maybe it's really
I'd
not
never
that bad.
know.
But,
I would never have noticed that.
You're never
How
you never
camera
will. Yeah, it's excellent. That's going back to what I was saying earlier about like the Mando really works. Like that cinematography in Mando is tremendous. And you would never know that it's different people in those suits. And it's all held together perfectly. And there's at least 4 different guys who are in that suit, right? With a different guy doing the voice, disconnected from the suit, and yet it feels so seamless. It's the same thing with Baby Yoda. Grogu is an amazing puppet. It's a puppet with like the tiniest bit of CG, and it looks so real. Like you really think that that's happening. Like it's mind blowing how good those effects are.
Yeah, I've even seen like behind the scenes videos, and I can see the people operating the puppet, and it still doesn't register.
I know.
That's what they're doing.
We're
And like
tricked. We're fully tricked as an audience.
That's Baby Yoda. That's just Baby Yoda doing his thing. Like yeah, it's remarkable how much I mean Industrial Light and Magic, but really Star Wars has pushed the envelope on so many things.
Oh yeah. Special effects wouldn't be where they are without George Lucas, Lucasfilm, ILM, everything that they've done over the last 40, 50 years. It's incredible. I'm looking at Avatar 2 Way of Water, right? Like it's coming out pretty soon. Like James Cameron is standing on his shoulders. Mocap, because of everything Andy Serkis did. Things have been, and these are storytelling tools, right? Like I'm also perfectly fine watching a movie that is done fully practically, sci-fi with terrible effects. Like I always joke about Doctor Who. Like Doctor Who looks pretty cheap. I love Doctor Who. I love everything about it. You're standing on a set at like the BBC studios. Nothing about it looks convincing, and I am fine with that. It is awesome. I'm all in. So you don't need that to tell a great story if the story's good. Star Wars also really has a great story in almost every iteration of it. So the special effects then just like help it go that much further. And I think they won a bunch of Saturn awards recently for some of their special effects. I think it was Obi-Wan that won, right?
I think so. They regularly win.
Yeah. I can't imagine who's gonna beat them. Yeah.
Even like it's like the only I think other big contender is like Marvel stuff, which is also mostly ILM.
Yeah,
like they're
ILM.
fighting each other.
Yeah, well, now that everything's under the Disney umbrella, and I'm a big Marvel fan myself. Like I read comics as a kid, but like nowhere near to like when people say they're like big comic fans, they mean they go really deep. I was pretty broad. Like I like the X-Men, and I sort of stuck with that. And now we've got all these movies and all of these shows, and I'm watching all of them. It's overwhelming, but I love it.
Lot. I was actually watching Hawkeye today because like, oh, it's Christmas. I'm gonna watch Hawkeye.
Oh, that's great. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, that's a good holiday rewatch.
Yeah, I watched the first 5 today. I'll probably watch
that's a lot.
last one tonight. It was, day off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's remarkable how much of an impact Star Wars has had on people, on the industry, on really like on the world. You can find Star Wars references or something related to Star Wars pretty much anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's hit the
Um,
pop culture in an unprecedented way. And like people like Luke, I am your father is like this thing that people just scream. It's weird. Use the force. It is a thing that has bled in, and I don't know how many more pop culture or big franchises are going to hit the pop culture in the same way, especially as now media has gotten so sliced. Like there's so many shows on, and we're all watching different things, and we all can't keep up. Like I just finished Wednesday, which I thought was spectacular, but there isn't like the following morning discourse at the water cooler. Like I go to work and it's like, did you binge Wednesday? And like one coworker is watching the first six, and I'm on episode one, and someone else is starting during Christmas break. And it's like there isn't this moment where we can all get together and be like, did you watch the first episode of Wednesday? What did you think? Like that's missing right now. And I think that's one of the reasons that brands or franchises don't hang in as long. Like you don't have that weekly beat. They were doing it with Marvel though for a while. And I remember at the WandaVision, the peak of it, that was crazy. Every week, like going online and be like, what the hell is going on with WandaVision?
I do, that's why I do like Star Wars doing the weekly releases, and Marvel's also doing it. I think that's better because that's the thing, like yeah, like you said, like with Netflix, there's a lot of shows on Netflix I really like, but it's like I almost kind of dread the release of a new season because I'm like, all right, I gotta watch this as fast as I can, or someone's gonna
Yeah.
spoil it for me.
It's like I have work. So if you're releasing on a Thursday or something, I gotta
Right,
wait till Saturday.
it's
Yeah.
always like a Wednesday or a Thursday.
Yeah.
I guess.
And then you can find spoilers by mistake. I was trying to not get spoiled for Stranger Things season 4 or whatever. And then there's already stuff on Twitter. Like 10 minutes later, I was like, did you skip to the end? It's not even physically possible for you to have watched all this stuff. Like, did you time travel to the end? Like, I guess you
Yeah.
did. But like, that's the kind of stuff where it's so hard to be engaged if you don't want to be spoiled. And then you sort of miss out on some discourse, but like,
Mhm.
and yeah, and there, no one has time to watch all of the pop culture right now. So I always try to like pick my, I'm up on all things Star Wars. So if something comes out, I watch it day of. That's my only rule. Marvel, I was like, as long as I watch it in the first week, because I do want to watch the Screen Crush wrap around and the new rock stars. I like their breakdowns, and I want to be current on those. They're also a licensee of ours, so I like to stay fresh on that content. But everything else can wait. And
Mhm.
I did do Wednesday right away though, once I heard how good it was. And I was like, oh man, like this is great. This has to be rewatched. So I'm gonna do that during Christmas break, I think.
Yeah, Christmas break is always my watching. However, it was. Now I work at an amusement park, so I work a lot of right at the day after Christmas. It's like a solid week, and
Mhm.
it's like just very long hours. But right now I'm only weekends, so I've been watching.
So you have
I
some
think I'm gonna
time, so that's
rewatch.
good.
Yeah, rewatch Hawkeye today. I'll probably watch Wednesday next. 'Cause my sister's been asking me to watch it. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Like you said, like Star Wars is always takes priority. Um, and Marvel pretty close second.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a lot of good Star Wars coming in the next year. Oh man, there's a lot. There's Jedi Survivor, Bad Batch, a lot of. I know you said you don't keep up with books and comics. There's
Mhm.
a lot of books and comics coming next year because I read those.
Oh yeah, the High
Um,
Republic is in full swing. There's a whole other phase, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, we're in phase two now.
Yep.
Then Acolyte, I think was
Yeah.
2023. And that I'm very excited for that, mostly because I'm very looking forward to High Republic gaining more of an audience because like
Mhm.
the books are so good and it's such an interesting era, and I'm very excited to see how like more people get into it.
Yeah.
That's
I want to be outside of the Luke Skywalker time period. And by
yeah,
and by Skywalker I mean like prequels to new trilogy. Like
hmm
that 75 years like run. Take me anywhere else. Not that Andor isn't my favorite thing in the world right now. I love Andor.
yeah,
It's like so close in on like the New Hope time period. It's
hmm
so good, but it's also very different in terms of tone and everything else.
yeah,
But I would love to just go to a whole new time period
hmm
and place and all new characters. That'd be great.
yeah. I'm very excited. I always because I know some people get very weird and they're like, oh, like I don't want more people to get into this thing I like. I'm like, that's all I want. I want more people to talk about
Yeah,
this stuff. So
agreed.
I'm excited for Acolyte. We're getting Ahsoka obviously this coming year. Mandalorian season 3, I think. That's Skeleton Crew is supposed to come out in 2023.
Yeah, I know so little about that show.
They like kind of dropped it by surprise, just announced it
Yeah.
at Celebration, and then kind of it.
Yeah, I know
They're
nothing.
filming right now, I think.
I looked at the calendar just the other day because we were getting ready for our Monday show, and it was the new year really kicks off with Bad Batch. So it's like
Mhm.
January 4th or whatever it is, right? Whatever that first
Yeah.
Wednesday is. And it's gonna run through March. So there'll be a little bit of overlap because Mando season 3 starts on March 1st. So it's like, okay, we get like basically 8 weeks of Bad Batch uninterrupted. I forget how many episodes there are total, but it's almost 20, I think, or around
Yes.
20. And then Mando's only 8 episodes. We get the Jedi Survivor game also in March, so right at the same time that Mando is on. So that's again overlapping content. And then Celebration happens, and then Ahsoka I thought was supposed to be July or August, so we might get a little bit of a break from like Celebration to Ahsoka. But yeah, that then you need to find room for Skeleton Crew or Acolyte. I thought Acolyte was going to be 2024, but I could
You
be
might be
mistaken.
right.
There's
I
so
know
much.
Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, I think they're both filming right now.
Yeah. Which they
So
probably need time because Andor season 2 is not coming until 2024, I
yeah,
don't
Ender
think.
season 2 also
Yeah.
just started filming, and they've got a couple years, which
Yeah.
uh
So long. I thought it was so fantastic, and it's so disappointing that like COVID messed up all the schedules because I
mhm.
really wanted 5 seasons of Andor. Like
Yeah.
I like especially after now having seen what they achieved in that first season, the type of stories they were able to tell to make it so different from everything we've ever seen and
Hmm.
yet feels so real and almost like points that it's like how mundane evil can be. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, they have PowerPoint presentations about how they're going to strip us of our rights. Like, this is too real.
Yeah.
Like I loved everything about it.
Yeah, Andor was so fantastic. I was so blown away because I was excited for it because I was like, oh, like I like Rebellion stuff. Like I love Rebels, obviously.
Mhm.
Like exploring the Rebellion will be cool. I'm excited to spend some time with Mon Mothma. I really like
Yes.
Cassian and Rogue One. Rogue One, I think, is my favorite Star Wars movie. So I really like Cassian. I was excited to see more of him, but the show just completely blew me away. And I was very lucky to get to go to the premiere with the Mandalorian Mercs of Andor in LA.
Oh,
So I got to see the first 3 episodes like a week or two early,
oh,
and
that's amazing.
I was just like buzzing like to talk about it with anyone, and I couldn't. I was just like,
Mm,
oh man. And everyone's like, what do you think? I was like, you just wait, like it's gonna be so good. Just blew me away. So I'm very excited for season 2. Sad we won't get a little more, but hopeful we'll get more like it in the future for sure.
yeah, I would like to stay in this very adult space. One that also isn't like highly merchandisable. Like I was telling someone, like Baby Yoda merch and Funko Pops and this and that make a lot of sense for the Mandalorian and all the merch, right? Like every consumer packaged good category that you can find would make sense with Mandalorian, even though it is adult storytelling, because you're still dealing with like weird aliens and bounty hunters and like silly creatures and all sorts of interesting stuff. Whereas like Andor is like literally people sitting at desks, like pushing buttons. And it's like, I don't really need a Funko Pop of Deidre Mira, although I would kind of love that. But they really stuck close in. They were like, okay, we're gonna do some Black Series figures, but like they didn't even release a Lego of like the one new ship, right? Like there's no Lego for this one. There's no children's books. Like there's a lot of categories that are not included in Andor because it's really just about the story and nothing else. And I would love to see like one show a year that just does that. That's all story, no merch. And by the way, I
Mhm.
work in consumer products. That's merch. Like so, and I'm saying that actively as someone part of like responsible for revenue for the consumer products department. But I think that something like Andor, like I can kind of monetize it in the high end space with like the uniforms, right? Like those Imperial officer uniforms. Like there's one that's slightly different, or but truly, I really don't need like a lineup of the Funko Pops. That's not really what the show's about. It's more of a case study in fighting fascism.
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah. I think, and the beauty about Star Wars is that it's so versatile. So
Mhm.
we can get like shows like, we can get like shows like The Mandalorian or Boba Fett or Rebels or Clone Wars, and we could also get Andor. And it's crazy because I think because the most apt comparison I found is someone connected a lot of the themes of Andor to Resistance.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, Resistance and Andor is so much more in common than Andor has with most of the other shows, and
Yeah.
they're so different still.
It's everyday citizens up against a tyrannical, gigantic army that they have no chance of beating. Yeah, and their rights are being squashed repeatedly. Yeah, the crew on Resistance. By the way, I had several of those signers at Celebration 2019 because that was new. So
I
like
met
Christopher Sean was there, and yeah,
I
who'd you
met
meet?
Tam. Oh, what's her name? Blanking on her name. Tam Rivora.
Oh my God, I'm terrible with names.
Susie. Is it Susie
Susie
McGrath?
McGrath.
Susie
Yeah,
McGrath. She was total sweetheart, and she was.
and
I
Myrna
didn't. I felt
Velasco plays the
yes.
other main woman whose name I'm blanking on. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it was actually funny. I was Justin Sabine, but I had a Gorg plushie because I just come from the Celebration store where they're selling Gorg plushies. So I had a Gorg with me, and while I was in line, Christopher Sean was sitting at his table and he points at the Gorg and was like talking to me a little bit. It was very funny.
He's very nice.
Yeah.
And he had a great celebration. Yeah, that show, I was surprised that we only got 2 seasons. I thought it was supposed to be 3. I think part of it is that it was made for like really little kids, and it probably didn't work because Disney XD it didn't know what to do with the show. Kind of like how they didn't know what to do with Rebels, but Rebels brought in a more adult audience. Resistance didn't bring in the kids or the adults, I don't think. I think that's what happened.
Yeah. I think Resistance also suffered from kind of being one of the shows during the like death knell of the Disney XD app because like Disney Plus was like about to launch.
Yeah.
And the Disney XD, I personally had a lot of issues with the Disney XD app the whole way through Rebels. But I felt like towards Resistance, it was really just the app was a pain most of the
Yeah.
time. I still can't forgive it. There was in the one episode where there's the girl that turns out to be a traitor there's like that one alien girl in season 2 and she hangs out with the crew and at the end of the episode it turns out she was a traitor working with the First Order, and the thumbnail in Disney XD for that episode was her talking to General Pyre or Commander
Oh,
Pyre,
geez.
a
Yeah.
hologram. So like she shows up in the beginning. I'm like, well, I know how this is gonna go.
Right. It's like a wrong JPEG or wrong
Yeah.
thumbnail. Yeah, I was sad to see Resistance not live up to the expectations that like we had from Rebels, right? Like I thought Rebels got better every season and really stuck the landing and went out with like such dignity and grace and really elevated storytelling. Um, and then Resistance just didn't deliver for the audiences, and it seems forgotten, right? Like if you think about all the streams of content, Resistance is being overlooked at the moment, which is sad. I would say there's always going to be something that lands in last place, though. People used to do those rankings of like rank your 9, back when we only had 9 movies. Or I guess it wasn't really the case. It was really we had the 6, and then the 5 came out after that. But like people were going the 1 through 9 and ranking around. There's always going to be something in last place. It doesn't mean I don't like that movie though.
Yeah.
Like, and for me, it changes. Like I remember very recently talking about how Attack of the Clones is probably my 9 out of the numbered movies. But it doesn't mean I don't like Attack of the Clones. And in fact, there are some really interesting things happening in that movie. I think it's a really interesting dissection of like the falling apart of a democracy in real time and the way that people get manipulated. It's a masterclass in manipulation, from Palpatine, from Dooku, from even Anakin without him even realizing that he's doing it. Like his descent into the dark side is really interesting. They're just things that people latch onto, and it's like, oh, I don't like the feeling of sand. I hate sand, right? So people meme these things, and it like brings down everyone's like remembering of the movie. Or people don't like the diner scene. And I'm like, fine, like I get that. But like the other heavy stuff, like the fight between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Jango Fett is amazing. So I don't dislike that movie. It's probably just it's never going to be like Return of the Jedi for me, or Empire or Last Jedi, which I love Last Jedi. So those discourses though can automatically like push something down and make people think that like it's not worth watching, and easy to do, especially too because it's like a cartoon.
Yeah. Yeah. I personally really love Resistance. And even though we only got 2 seasons, I definitely hope those characters can make their appearances once we start exploring more sequel trilogy era content.
Yeah.
I think they've been letting Rise of Skywalker kind of be the period for a little while, then eventually I'm sure they'll get back into it.
I think that there'll be something coming in that space because all the Lego movies even though they're a little bit anachronistic, are all post Rise of Skywalker.
Yes.
So it's the kind of thing where like Rey and Finn, like Finn is clearly training to be a Jedi, at least in the latest one. Rey is a Jedi. It also means at that point our original three, like the original Holy Trinity of like Luke, Leia, and Han, are all gone, unfortunately. But that doesn't stop them from time traveling or flashing back, or I think Billy D was in charge of like summer vacation. So it's like, what's happening here? It's like Orlando. Yeah. So yeah, and that's the nice thing too, is like Lego can have a lot of fun. They can kind of do whatever they want. But I think there's got to be more content coming in the new trilogy space, I would hope.
Yeah, I personally, I think I know some people like, oh, they know the movies are terrible, like they're just, I'm like, no, I think they're just letting, because the whole big deal about Rise of Skywalker was like, this is like the last one, like the last big movie. So I think they're letting it rest for a little
Yeah,
bit,
exactly.
letting us sit with that, and then going back to those characters. That's my take anyway. I don't know anything, but
Well, I think one of the things that's working really well for Star Wars is everything in the Mandalorian time period. So that Age of the New Republic, things seem to be uh, working well. Like Mando season one, gigantic hit. Mando season two, equally good. The build up for Mando season three, people are super excited about. And now they've got the Ahsoka show landing in that space, and Book of Boba Fett's in that space. So it's the kind of thing where they've formed like their own little like ecosystem in that in between time period of 6 and 7. I'm calling it 6.5, but like that zone is actually like a nice amount of space. Like there's a good 30 years between 6 and 7. So we've got space to play. And I think you keep exploring that, and any of those people could eventually make it to the new trilogy time period or even go post 9. Kind of like how Ezra is going from post 3.5 into now this space 6.5, right? We know we're pulling him in, even though he wasn't in 4, 5, 6, obviously, and neither was Ahsoka, but they will jump. They will make the jump to warp or to light speed straight over into this new time period, which is going to be very exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what they do with these characters, and especially, and again, as someone who reads the books, there are a lot of books in that 30-year time period, and a lot of them have some really. I'm a big fan of the politics of Star Wars. I know some people hear that and want to go to sleep.
Oh, I love it.
I love the council meetings, the like Senate hearing, like I love it. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff that's very interesting in that 30-year period, book wise. There's a really good Leia book that like really details it. Um, so I'm
And some great Mon
hopefully,
Mothma content in there.
yes,
Yeah.
Mon Mothma's in this too.
Yeah.
And there's a lot interesting that I would love to see brought to life on screen for a wider audience. Especially we were talking about like having an Andor-like show. I think an Andor-like show with like the forming of the New Republic would be super interesting.
Yeah. Well, Mon Mothma becomes the president.
And we get more Mon Mothma.
Yeah. And so did you notice this in Andor? And someone else pointed this out. The tree that's in her apartment is the same type of tree. Her apartment has that weird tree structure. It's so I guess after Operation Cinder fails and the Empire has to finally surrender, Mas Amedda surrenders the Empire to Mon Mothma. It's in one of the books. I think you must have read it. And he surrenders the Empire on Chandrila under the tree. That same tree is in her apartment, not the exact same tree, but that same type of
the
tree.
kind of tree, yeah.
So I'm like, oh my God, you have her and you have the tree. Film the scene, like give it a flash forward, like give us a coda with that. Because I think that's something that like that's a huge moment. Like we don't know that like most people probably don't know that the Empire ends not with Luke Skywalker blowing up the Death Star really, but like Mas Amedda, who's like a secondary character from the prequels, surrendering it to Mon Mothma, who's in 90 seconds of Return of the Jedi under a tree on a planet you would otherwise never heard of, right? Like that moment needs to be bigger and to a wider audience. And if it's only in a book, only in a book, right? Like, and it's not in a streaming show or in a movie, it misses the broadest possible audience. So if we can do that, and maybe that's what heads into that time period. I could see them taking Genevieve and like aging her up a little and being like, we'll put a little gray in your hair, we'll pull back on some of the makeup and done. You're ready to go for like, New Republic era. Like she can go be our president. It'd be amazing if like Mando and everyone ran into her. We know she's alive. We have all this content to prove it. So she's terrific in that role, by the way. Like keep putting Genevieve and stuff. Like I just sure into everything the same way we're doing with Ahsoka.
It's so remarkable how like almost how lucky they are. Like she was originally cast for a basically background appearance in a scene of Revenge of the Sith that got cut. Like
Yep.
not that she didn't like earn the role or anything, but I doubt it was a very intensive casting process. They were looking probably more for looks.
Yeah.
And then they
She
end
really
up,
does look like
bring her,
Caroline. It's amazing.
yes,
Yeah.
and then they bring her into Rogue One, and then more so in Andor, she gets to reprise this role that got cut, and she's so phenomenal
She's
at
a
it.
force. She's that scene in the Senate when she's like talking about it being a temple and everyone's booing her. I was livid at I was like, who is booing at my Mon Mothma? You don't even know. Like I was like, I'm gonna fly to Coruscant and punch some people. I don't know how like the choices this lady has to make like on and that terrible husband. Oh my God. I love that she's setting him up though. The fact that like the money's missing and she knows the driver is a spy and it's like you and your gambling. I was like, oh, he's gonna go die in prison. And we're all cheering, we're all clapping. I love everything about that, everything she's been doing this whole season. I think she's the MVP of the season. Her and Deidre, like, which by the way, if
Yeah.
they ever team up, we're all in trouble. I know they're on opposite sides, but if they ever find common ground and align on something, they could run the galaxy.
Absolutely, yeah. I think honestly the entire cast of Andor was such a powerhouse. Truly, like everybody. I know Diego Luna is now the second actor nominated for a Star Wars role for an award. I think he was nominated for a Golden Globe, I want to say.
Yep, that came
And
out
it's
yesterday. Yep.
very deserved. Everyone, all the monologues, like everything. Everyone did
Yeah.
phenomenal. And I'm very excited to see all of them or most of them. I think we lost a few, like poor Kino Loy.
Yeah. I,
Um,
I hope, I mean,
return.
here's the thing. He didn't, I was saying this
We
to
didn't see
someone,
him.
like,
We didn't see him die. And
right.
In Star Wars, even if you see him die, it doesn't always
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
always matter.
Pour one out for Darth Maul. But yeah, poor Kino Loy. By the way, how great was Andy Serkis?
Absolutely.
Someone could have helped him. At the same time, though, I technically can swim, but I don't think I could swim in an ocean and survive that drop and make it all the way to shore and not drown. So I think a lot of those people died, and we don't really want to talk about that, but you had to make a chance. Like, isn't the purpose of the show? It's so funny. I said this weeks ago on my show. The purpose of Andor is to try, which is
Mhm.
such a disconnect from Yoda saying like do or do not, there is no try. In Andor, it's all about trying and this like little bit of progress. Like Kino Loy helped everyone escape, even though he really couldn't. And he's like, I'm sure he jumped and tried to swim and probably drowned. But
Mhm.
like he and everyone else had to make that attempt because it's that or you die in that prison. So like effort was really necessary and taking a chance.
Absolutely. I think it's very connected to what Jin says in Rogue One. She
Mhm.
says, like, we take the next chance and the next until our chances are spent. That's very much like one of the many themes of Andor. And
Oh,
I'm
without a
very
doubt.
excited for season two as we get closer to actual Rogue One time, how much further that these stories get tied
Yeah.
together.
And who some of the
Because
guests might be. I don't think we're going to get the cameo explosions like Mando and whatnot, but I think we're
mhm,
going to run into a couple familiar faces.
I
Certainly a
think
Bail Organa, you know.
mhm. I think sometimes I think people are very often very quick to call things like, oh, it's like a fan service, it's a cameo, but sometimes I think things are a natural result of sharing a universe. So like in
Yeah.
Andor, like it'd be very natural to see like a Bail Organa, even like casting as a Fulcrum agent, even seeing like Callus or
Yeah.
possibly even Ahsoka or like Hera, when they're on Yavin, like
Yeah. Any of the Fulcrums.
certainly.
So Hera, Bail, and Ahsoka all make perfect sense because Andor. I actually thought that they were going to call the show Fulcrum. And then it would have given us a lot of leeway to play with all of those people as co-leads. Because Andor is what the third build person in Rogue One. They actually just did an honest trailer about this the other day, and it was like if you remember who was the third spot in Rogue One, the first standalone movie from Lucasfilm. We've got a show about him that no one asked for.
Who was
But
who
then I was
was the
like, by the way, it's
second?
great.
Who was
I
the
want to.
second? Because
I
I
think
know
they were
Jin would
saying
be
that.
first.
I think they were saying Ben Mendelsohn is really second build. So yeah,
That's probably true.
yeah. I was like, because he's the lead villain. She's the lead hero.
Yeah.
He's the lead villain. Andor is the secondary. He's like the male lead, right? Like the
Hmm.
under. Which here's the thing, I think he's actually like I think he has as much screen time as Felicity, and is
Mhm.
certainly the connectivity to the rebellion. And if you were going to pick a character from that group to follow beforehand, I'd rather spend time with him than anyone else from that stack, truly.
Mhm.
Like he's super interesting and proven by this first season. I was blown away by the stories they gave us, and I got nothing right. My predictions, all the things I thought going in, I didn't get any of it right, and I was pleasantly surprised the entire time. Everything they gave us was tremendous, and it was nothing what I expected. And I think that's good storytelling.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's I know you said you don't read, but if you're, an audiobook on your way to work kind of person, there's a book called Rebel Rising. It's relatively short. It's Jin's story before Rogue One, and there's a lot of nice connections to Cassian from what we see in Andor and see.
Nice.
The
There's so
absolute
many of them, and I started back when I was first at Tops, and I read like the first Journey to the Force Awakens books, and then before you know it,
hmm
there were 100 of them. And you know what happens? You buy a
There's
book,
so many.
it sits on the shelf, and before you know it, you're collecting books, but you're not reading them. And
hmm
the books I would read though are like the source books or the art of. Like I have the Art of Rebels, which is like the big, the monster of like all four seasons, the Art of Rebels book, and it is a behemoth, and that's almost like an encyclopedia, and you just flip through and you use it as like a reference book every now and then. So you keep coming back to that. But yeah, the stories I'll usually just like read them real quick on the Wikipedia, which is not great. I'm not recommending anyone does that. If anyone's listening, support your authors. I do love the Ahsoka book, and I'm hoping that there'll be more stories with Ahsoka. Not that we're not getting enough of her on TV,
There's
and
never
everywhere
enough.
else. Yeah,
Never enough. So
I
good.
agree.
Some
And more
people say we're
Rebels.
getting too much. There's never enough.
There's no such thing. And my feeling is like you don't have to keep up with everything. As
Mhm.
proven by me, like I'm not keeping up at all with the High Republic, but I hear it's great. And there will come a point where I'll probably watch the Acolyte, and then I'll need to go back and learn about these
Mhm.
characters, which is fine. Like I don't mind there being more content than I can currently absorb, because if it's out there, I can always go get it at another time.
Yeah, and I mean for me, like I'm the only books I haven't read are the ones that were released like a week or two ago. I'm up on all the books, but I am hopelessly behind on comics. I read the
Yeah.
Kanan comics, and that's pretty much it. I think I read a little bit of the Chewy ones when they came out,
I
but
liked the first run of Dr. Aphra. We were reading that at work
mm,
with when I was at Tops, and the one that was just Star Wars. I remember when Star Wars 1 came out in the end of 2014 or the beginning of 2015. I want to say it was like right at the end of 2014, under now like Marvel and Lucas and whatnot,
mm,
because we actually advertised in that run of the comic, I think in like 6 months later or whatever it was. Um, it was good, but like you can't keep up. There was a
so
Leia book
many.
and a Lando book and a Han book, and I was like, well, who's in the mainline book if all of these people have their own comic? Like it was very that.
There's so many. I haven't read the Afro ones, but I they did adapt the first batch of them, or maybe her first appearance in Darth Vader, into an audio drama.
Ooh,
With like a full cast and everything. Excellent,
how did I not
excellent
hear
listen.
about that? Huh. I'll have to
It's
go check
it's
that
and
out.
it's narrated by Afra herself. It's like Afra recording, like sort of how Lando does the Lando Chronicles.
The
It's a bit like
the
Afra
Calrissian
recording.
Chronicles, yes.
Yeah, it's a bit like Afra kind of
I
telling
love
her own
that.
story. Shows so much of her personality. You get to hear the voices of 000 and everyone.
Oh,
No,
interesting.
it's an amazing
Yeah.
audio drama. Definitely
All right, I gotta
recommend
check that out.
it.
Thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah, very good. Well, I think, it's been a while. I'm sure you have to work tomorrow, so I won't take too much more of your time. But thank you so much for talking to me. It was
Of
such a
course.
pleasure.
Yeah, it was great meeting
Um,
you in, well, I'll say in real life, but we have met in real life, but this is the first time we had a real like long form conversation, which is
yeah,
wonderful.
it was very, very lovely to talk to you. Do you have any like plugs or anything to share with listeners if they want to find you, or plug any Denuo Novo things if you
Oh
have
yeah.
to?
Oh boy. So being a licensee, I gotta plug the brand, right? Visit us
Mhm.
at on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Denuo Novo. That's DENUONOVO, Denuo Novo. We are the officially licensed high-end Star Wars costumes and collectibles. We do a lot of great helmets, and we have a lot of great costume pieces. We're actually running a sale right now, 15% off on costumes and 10% off the rest of the site. and with free domestic shipping and 50% off international shipping. So great time to buy if you're looking for Christmas gifts. We are high end, so don't be surprised when you see a $700 helmet up on the site. But everything is on sale right now. We've got quite the selection, over 50 items to choose from across the saga, including the Sabine helmet. You and I were talking about. You probably saw at Celebration.
Yes, I think we have one coming in the mail at some point soon.
Yes,
So
very soon. We're still working on. There are definitely some things that are hitting us with supply chain and timing, where like almost all of our pre-orders are in, and a few are like, it's like, where is the boat? So
yeah.
there's like literally being like, where's the container? But yeah, we're nearing the end of the year, which is very exciting, and we're getting ready for 2023. So yeah, so you can follow at Denuo Novo to get all of that. And if you want to connect with me, I'm at Darth Von Ohlen on Instagram, and still on Twitter, at least temporarily. I'm part of the Virtual Cantina Network, so you can find that Facebook page. It's actually labeled Star Wars Celebration Europe 2023. Their YouTube is youtube.com/The Virtual Cantina, and that's where you'll find my show, Star Wars Rebels Revisited. I'm live every Monday night at 9 p.m. We go live on the Facebook and port to YouTube, and we watch an episode and we talk for about an hour about Rebels. So if you love Rebels, come on by. It's a very in-depth conversation about the action of the episode and mostly how it ties to the other parts of the saga.
Yeah, and I'll just do the Star Wars Geek Girl. So on Twitter and Instagram, we're at SW Geek Girl. We have the website, StarWarsGeekGirl.com. I haven't been keeping up with this as much just because I was graduating, so I had a lot of work to do, a lot of things going on. But I'm hoping in the holidays to get back up on it more. I do just weekly blogs about random things in Star Wars, book reviews, until I run out of books to read, all sorts of things. I think that's it. Yes.
I'm gonna have to read your book reviews while I'm waiting to read the book. That'll be my starting point. And by the way, congrats on your graduation. That's very
Thank
exciting.
you. Yes, I'm very excited. I graduated in film, so hoping to work on Star Wars, get there someday.
Nice. It's great to know what you want to do at such a young age. And you got your whole life ahead of you. It's awesome.
Yeah. I'm very excited. I thought I'd be scared, but I'm mostly just excited, which is good.
Yeah. Well, fear leads to anger. But it's a very it is I get it though. I remember graduating college 20 years. My 20-year anniversary is next year. 20-year reunion is next year. So I graduated in 03. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I did a year in government. And then I found my way to Nielsen, and then worked in CPG, and then got to licensed product, which is entertainment adjacent. But I was always a lifelong geek. So I always tell people, like, if you have a passion and see if you can work in that space. I wasn't thinking about this 20 years ago, like being on YouTube. Obviously there wasn't YouTube, but like being engaged in fandoms in any way, shape, or form. But we need the arts more than ever. Even as HBO is taking down content daily. I don't know what the hell they canceled today, Westworld and whatever else. Like, don't let that deter you. Like, the arts are critical and necessary. We consume art every day. We need art as a society. So please continue to make art.
Yeah, well, thank you again so much for being on the show. To all the listeners, thank you for listening. May the force be with you.
Star
And
Wars Geek Girls. They're geek girls that like Star Wars. And sometimes cry.